All right. Well, Kenji, another member of the
Uh,
Carnivore Certification Program. It's good to speak with you. How are you doing?
Good, good. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm looking forward to taking your questions. You gave a quick rundown of the things that you wanted to go through. They're more, of course, they're biochemically, related and all that. And I'm looking forward to answering them. And first, before I get to them, though, I want to ask you. You said that you've
Mhm.
been in the program for a while and you've effectively finished it. What have you thought of the program thus far, and have you enjoyed it?
Yeah, it was short, shorter than what I expected, but I guess, I'm doing animal-based, carnivore style, diet or lifestyle, then, you know, that helps me, go faster, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah, I learned, yeah, quite a lot.
good, good. So you've been carnivore for a while. Then how long have you been carnivore then?
Let's see, maybe about 2 years.
2 years. Okay.
Yeah.
How have you felt on that journey?
I was like a keto like 6, 7 years. Then, I started to like eliminate like all the plant things.
Hmm.
And actually got better or, feel better now. So,
Good.
you know,
So is it safe to say that the remaining plants in your diet may have been dragging you down, whether you realized it or not?
right. I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what happened to me as well. Because then I try and even just do a slight reintroduction and then it doesn't work.
Hmm.
I start feeling symptoms that I'm like, was I feeling these the whole time? Like that's kind of crazy to think about. Like really, I was
Right.
doing that to myself the whole time. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
so well, I'm glad that you've enjoyed the program and that you've had a successful venture thus far on carnivore. With that being said, like I said, I'm ready to take your questions and answer them to the best of my abilities.
All right.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. Do you have the document I sent you?
Yeah, we can pull it up. I don't, did you send a specific document or did you send it only in an email?
I sent it to your email with like a Word doc, but
Okay.
I mean, my question, I can read it.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I think that would be best because I might have to
Yeah,
search through our thread a little bit. Yeah.
right. Because I take um apple cider vinegar,
Hmm.
like a drinks, like make like a diluted drinks, and I heard that depletes potassium,
Hmm.
taking apple cider vinegar. So I don't know how that works, why it depletes potassium taking apple cider vinegar. And, do I need to take supplements,
I don't think,
potassium supplements?
well, I can definitely say to the last part of your question, I don't think you need to be taking a potassium supplement. If anything, that can cause an issue. I mean, for example, one of the things that they'll do in a medical setting, and I know this is in an exaggerated situation, but it just goes to show that if anything, you're going to be getting too much and not too little, is that one of the things they'll do in
Hmm.
order to perform an open heart surgery, and if they have to stop the heart, it'll be a large dose of potassium. So I try and advise against taking large doses, especially of electrolytes that can have that effect on the heart, the vascular system. In terms of the
Hmm.
specific mechanism as to why it has been touted to be the case that you will lose potassium with apple cider vinegar, I'm not quite sure because the
Hmm.
only real ingredient in apple cider vinegar is effectively acetic acid, and then you've got some bacteria in there, especially if you've got the mother, the apple cider vinegar with the mother. Um, I'm not quite
Right.
sure of why that is. I wonder, I would actually, the first thing that comes to mind is the question of what type of study was conducted or what type of studies, plural, were conducted that were used to arrive at that conclusion. How long the studies went on for, what was the sample
Right.
size, all those basic questions. Because I struggle to believe that taking even, especially in the small amount that people typically take apple cider vinegar, because people aren't drinking it from the gallon, so that that's not happening.
Mhm.
That would cause any problems with potassium regulation at all. What can, what I've seen purported is a blunting of a glucose spike with taking apple cider vinegar. You know, I'll drink the apple cider vinegar before a meal to blunt a glucose spike. If anything, that probably has to do, if it has any effect at all, it probably has to do with the fact that it has an absorption rate effect, perhaps. I'm not quite sure though. I really don't know. I do not know the mechanism behind that because acetic acid itself, knowing how it's metabolized,
Mhm.
I mean, it's effectively turned directly into acetyl-CoA. It doesn't go through beta oxidation, it doesn't go through glycolysis. It's very rapidly taken up. And if anything, by that mechanism, if it contributes to acetyl-CoA production, it would, if used by cells, prevent it would actually hinder glucose uptake. So it's really odd. I'm not quite sure. I have very little confidence in either of those claims, either of them. And so unless
Hmm.
I could actually ask you, I'm not sure if you've tracked blood glucose before, postprandially, like after a meal, or if you have a continuous glucose monitor or something like that. Um, if you've seen any distinct difference between, you know, blood glucose regulation after a meal, um, with and without consuming apple cider vinegar beforehand? I'm not sure.
Well, actually, I don't use CGM, so I can't say much, but I heard that the short chain fatty acids,
Yeah.
can be used as energy faster than ketones. So
Uh,
I'm not sure about that.
Potentially. Well, potentially. And I think the reason for that is because yeah. You know what? I think you're right. And the reason for that is because ketone metabolism does require a few extra steps. Like for example, you've got two primary ketone bodies. You've got acetoacetate and then beta hydroxybutyrate. The latter actually coming from the former. But what happens is no matter which one of those the cell takes up, it's either go it's either going to have to convert beta hydroxybutyrate back into acetoacetate to continue the process, or it takes up acetoacetate directly. And either way, it goes to acetoacetate, and then I believe directly to acetyl CoA, and then acetyl CoA, and then it goes through a few separate pathways before it can actually enter the mitochondria. In the case of
Mm.
short chain fatty acids, it's more direct. I think it goes directly into the mitochondria through certain
Oh,
transport.
yeah.
So it would make sense that it's used faster. However, the absolute difference in time, I don't know if we're really talking about anything that's meaningful. Because again, you talk about chemical reactions. You're talking about each step occurring within less than 1 millionth of a second. So,
Mm.
but if that's the case, if the theory is that, well, if you consume acetic acid, for example, or actually, is this related to the acetic acid question, or is this a separate question when it comes to saturated short chain fatty acids?
Um, Maybe, like the point, if we talk about the reducing like blood glucose,
Hmm.
then if we have enough energy from short chain fatty acids, we need less glucose, maybe, I don't know. So maybe
Yeah,
that's how it works with
yeah,
apple cider vinegar or any other vinegar.
yeah. Well, that might be, yeah, because that was actually why I said that if anything, I would expect it to actually hinder a glucose uptake phenomenon. But that's only in the case of them both being in the bloodstream. Before the
Mhm.
bloodstream, if you're talking about the small intestinal cells having enough energy from short chain fatty acids, for example, if you drink like apple cider vinegar or something and it's using acetic acid, then that
Mhm.
could explain why it would blunt a glucose uptake because it's taking longer to enter the bloodstream because the small intestines have something to work with already. So that mechanism actually could very well make sense. I would have to look deeper into it because I've heard it. It's very trite. I mean, I've heard it for years now. Apple cider vinegar is like the be all end all. It's the cure all. When it comes to fixing blood sugar spikes. Not the cutting the carbs in the first place, but drinking vinegar before your meal. But
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, that was my question, but I look for like a potassium, like a depletion information online, but I couldn't find the, real mechanism, like reason why, So
Yeah,
that's why I'm asking, but it's okay. We will find out.
yeah. At the end of the day, whenever you're looking to see if there's real problems with potassium deficiency outside of the context of dealing with people one-on-one on such a diet or doing such a protocol and just seeing how they present in your perspective, you would have to perform a large scale sort of prospective cohort study or something like that that study people for a sufficiently long amount of time, and you would have to observe
Mm.
two populations, one of which is doing that protocol, the other which is sort of the control group, and you'd have to see if there's any significant difference in incidence rates of potassium deficiency, not based on just a marker, but actually based on presentation, because as we know, blood markers are not um, the best thing to employ or refer to is probably the best way of putting it. And if that hasn't been done, then the only thing that you have left to work with is, well, do people, is there a significant amount of people from each individual person's perspective of people coming down with potassium deficiency by consuming apple cider vinegar? And if there's not, well, it doesn't mean that there isn't a potential concern. It doesn't have any influence, but it does mean that, well, it's merely an opinion. I mean, it's really nothing, there's nothing else to say behind that. It's a theory. So,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, I like to see studies and the mechanism, like the metabolism, why, So
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
yeah, and I'm taking like 300 milligrams, of supplement, potassium citrate. So,
Mhm.
not too much. So, I'm okay, I think.
Yeah, it's only whenever you go like really overboard with that stuff. If you're not having any
Mhm.
symptoms, then no problem. But I also would say if you weren't having symptoms beforehand, then there's also no need for the supplement. But, yeah.
Yeah. All right. And my second question, do you know NAC, N-acetylcysteine supplements?
Um, I think they might be related to NAD, but I'm not sure.
So,
I'm
like
not
a
entirely familiar with them. I've heard of acetylcysteine before, for sure.
right.
Yeah.
I
But
mean that sometime, like a long time ago, I heard that that also depletes potassium. So I was, looking for the information why, but I couldn't find it. So
well, so if you've been taking it, have you been taking it?
uh-huh. Yes, I am.
Okay. If you're taking it, do you know if that is a naturally occurring compound in a carnivore diet or even just plant foods? Do you know of that being the case?
Yeah, it's naturally, occurring in meats
Yeah.
mostly,
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure we're
but
talking about an amino acid, perhaps.
not much amount.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Because
but
I believe that we were talking
yeah,
an amino acid.
it
Um,
is.
yeah. If it's an amino acid, yeah, it's a
Hmm.
supplement form of, I believe, well, cysteine is an amino acid. So it'd probably be a
Yeah.
supplement form of it. Um, then we're just talking, yeah, okay, again, if it's just an amino acid, knowing amino acid metabolism, then I don't believe that it would have any effect on potassium regulation. But of course, you do need, here's something interesting. If you deplete people intentionally of potassium, you do actually see an association with significant muscle loss. So potassium is
Oh,
essential for amino acid synthesis in muscles. So it's clearly involved in the
oh,
pathway of synthesizing amino
oh, yeah.
acids. Um, as a when it comes to talking about its effects on potassium when it's used for like glucose production or if it's used through oxidative deamination, that I'm not familiar with, but yes, you will see potassium is very important for muscle protein synthesis. So if that's the logic, if you take a lot of amino acids, like if you take a lot of a certain amino acid, then you're going to need more potassium. Then that seems even more plausible of a mechanism. It just depends on how much of the amino acid you're taking, and it depends on really what it depends on, by my estimation, is how much the body is using of it to synthesize muscle. Because if you get too much of an amino acid, well, then it's not even used to synthesize muscle in the first place. It's used to either create glucose or create fat or whatever it may be. And then it goes through a completely different pathway. So that's actually that's interesting. I feel like it would only affect potassium levels significantly if you're not getting enough cysteine in your diet in the first place, actually.
Okay, yeah, that make, somewhat sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds, you know, more, yeah, reasonable.
Okay. Good.
Right. All right, my second question is IG ratio,
Yeah.
like insulin glucagon ratio on your like a lecture.
Mhm.
I like to know that like actual numbers, that we can measure, you know.
Yeah.
So do you have any numbers?
So when it comes to glucagon and insulin, typically you have to standardize or really normalize the units because I believe with glucagon it's picomoles. And then
Hmm.
with insulin, it's different. It's a different unit. So with
Okay.
glucagon, again, I can go ahead and double check that because again, I believe that glucagon is measured in picomoles, which I can't remember. So micromoles
Mm.
is different than picomoles. So I'll look that up
Right.
right now actually because yeah, picomoles, and then this was at the top of my head because I deal with this all the time. Um, I believe that we're talking about, yeah, it's an international unit. Yeah, that's why it was throwing me off because it's an international unit. It's
Oh,
its own separate thing. It's not actually it's not anything like micromole or
right.
picomole. Yeah, picomole, it's equal to 10 to the minus 12 moles, so 1 trillionth of a mole.
Right.
And then when it comes to
Mm.
insulin, yeah, it's an international unit, 34.7 micrograms of pure insulin. So one international unit of insulin is equal to 34.7 micrograms. Yeah, no wonder I didn't understand that because I knew that there was something different about that compared to glucagon. So what you'd have to do is you'd have to standardize that. Um, and I'm using standardized when in reality I shouldn't be saying standardized because that's a statistical term. But you should be normalizing them and making them equivalent. Um, and then you can actually get an idea. Like if you're reading a study, for example, and I've seen one in like Cell magazine that was
Mm.
assessing glucagon levels postprandially over the course of like 6 hours after a meal was consumed, and they had a regression analysis that showed a line of the glucagon level over time, but they never gave the unit. I had to find that out myself, but once you actually
Mm.
learn that if you dig deep enough into the study, usually they will put it up, and then you can translate it if you know the figures, if you want to compare it to insulin, because
Mm.
that's a really critical unit to observe whenever you're trying to assess which metabolic pathway, or really not pathway, but like whether the yin or the yang is predominating in the body, like catabolism or anabolism, you know, that's
Mm.
extremely important. Not the absolute levels, rather more so actually the combination, the ratio. So
Okay. All right. Yeah.
yeah.
So it's not easy to, yeah, come up with the ratio like without like measurements, I guess.
Yeah, exactly. And then it gets,
Right.
I mean, you could say it doesn't get too complicated, but if you're going to get like really granular, a mole of something is dependent on the mass of the individual molecule as well. So then it's like, even if you're
Mhm.
going to equate them to each individual mole of something, it's like, if you want to, it's not, it's comparing it in relative terms, but not in absolute terms because they're different masses themselves as well. But the best thing you can do, of course, is just to observe the molar amount of them and then normalize them
Okay.
to compare them. Yeah.
Can we do this at home, or I mean, you have to get the, like a medical,
Yeah, you'd
like
probably,
a
yeah, that gets
sample?
into the methodology and all that. You'd have to get a specific kit, I suppose. Usually
Mm.
this is done in a clinical setting. Um, I don't
All right.
think that these materials are available to the general public, at least as of yet. Frankly, I actually hope I'm incorrect, because I like the idea of people having the ability to do that stuff themselves, so long as they do it
Mm.
responsibly. Um, but I would, of course, understand why it wouldn't be available to the general public because a lot of people cannot be trusted to do that stuff responsibly. So, you know,
Mhm.
yeah.
Okay, thank you. And number three, um, about the glucose molecule, the shape.
Yeah.
Is it, I mean, are there like two types, like a long chain like and hexagonal?
Yeah.
Are there two types?
Yeah, I'm glad that you brought this up because it's something that I've neglected to mention in my videos for a long time now. Um, Whenever I say that glucose is reactive, well, really, let's go back a little further. So you got in a normal circumstance, you've got about a teaspoon of glucose going through your bloodstream at all times, and the body likes to keep it that way.
Mm.
But not all of that glucose is reactive because if it were, you'd have serious issues. Very, like a lot of issues. Um, Most of the glucose exists in that aldohexose form, like the
Okay.
hexagonal. Yeah, most of it does. However, I believe it's 0.02%, a very small amount actually.
Mm.
0.02% exists in what's called its linear form, its unchained form. So it actually does look
Okay.
more linear than it doesn't look cyclical or closed in its chain. That exposes its aldehyde group, and aldehydes themselves are extremely reactive. That's what causes it to bind to tissues and all that, and wreak havoc. Not even when glucose isn't absorbed by a cell, it can attach to the outside of them too and basically stick to them through that non-enzymatic process and derange the proteins, disable them, render them completely useless, and effectively cause the body to perceive them, if we're going to anthropomorphize the body a bit, as foreign. And yeah, so it is the vast minority, but it doesn't change the fact that I mean it's still enough clearly because if you go above that amount, even just by ostensibly a little bit, you get into a diabetic state and it causes a lot of issues in people. So yeah, you're right. That closed chain form is not the reactive form. It is a different form, and it's the typical form that glucose takes, but 0.02% in normal conditions, normal temperature, normal pH range, and all that, it will be in its linear form, and that's the reactive form.
Okay, that tiny amount, even that tiny amount would like affect us like a healthy wise, I guess.
Yep. Yep. Which is
Okay.
it's insane to think about, but I mean, yeah, no, that's it is true. Yeah. Very
All right.
interesting. Yeah.
All right. Okay. Question number four. Calorie myths.
Mhm.
That's the quiz we had in
Yeah.
the like module. Um, the question is mass and energy are not interconvertible.
Yeah.
That's the true or false.
Yeah, yeah. So mass and energy are interconvertible. They are. For example, we know that there's the theory of relativity, the E equals mc squared kind of thing. Energy equals mass times the speed of light squared. The problem is that the reason I brought that up in that module is because in the practical world on a day-to-day basis, you never actually see that happen, especially in the body. So, for example, you do have calories released, which is why we create body heat, right? But it's not exactly it is a way of mass being converted into energy. You can think of it as because what's happening is you've got a bunch of reactions, chemical reactions occurring in the body, and they're exothermic. So as a result of them occurring, some of the mass is being released as heat. Most of it is actually being released. It's not actually being used by the body. About 70%. 30% of it is actually encapsulated and used by the body. So the body's actually quite inefficient in that respect. But the reason that I brought it up is because on a macro scale, that's not what's going on. So really what happens when you eat food is you're consuming mass in the forms of carbohydrates, protein, fat, alcohol,
Mhm.
whatever it may be. And then you're chemically interacting those substances under control with molecular oxygen through those pathways. But the question is, well, is the calorie number an exact reflection of the calories that you are yielding from the food? That's one question. No, because I just said that some is released and then some is used. So there's a disparity there. The second thing is that the calorie number on food labels is already not considering it's plus or minus 20% because you can't measure energy in the first place. You can only estimate it. The third thing is that the calorie number on food labels is considering things that aren't even digested in the first place, like fiber. And it's also
Mhm.
completely failing to consider the fact that even the things that are digestible, how much of it are you digesting? You're never digesting all of it, or else we would never, we wouldn't be excreting mass. We're not all the mass that we consume. It's not just, either being released to energy or then or fully stored forever. That's not what's happening. And so those are the main disparities of the calorie model. And also, there's even, again, the accountability question. I think, well, I already covered that in the beginning of that explanation. The accountability, like, okay, let's say that there actually were 120 calories that you were going to yield from that food after you consumed it, and you knew that you were going to absorb all of it. Well, even if calories had any effect on your physiology, which they don't, because we don't have a calorie transport chain, for example, we have an electron transport chain, and the body is mainly it's mass, not exactly energy. Well, even if that were the case, are you absorbing 120? Well, no, you're not absorbing 120. You're not using 120. You are using 30% of that. Not to mention that the way that it's used is also going to be dependent on your hormones. So even if we were going to accept the calorie model as being true, like let's say it just were true for the sake of the argument, that doesn't exonerate the role that hormones play. Um, for example, how is that fat going to be used? Are you mainly going to store it, or are you going to use it for energy production purposes? Because if you're going to use it for the latter, then, well, you can have an uncoupling of mitochondria in fat cells, and that will actually cause more of the fat to be used for energy production than otherwise would be, which releases more heat. So you actually release more calories. It's really, even if the calorie model were correct, you would mainly want to focus on hormones anyway. But the cherry on top is that it's not correct anyway. There's way too many disparities in the energy balance model of obesity because it's based on a false notion that the human body is a closed system and not an open system. So
Yeah, I
I
mean,
hope that
even
made
the
sense.
poop, yeah, the poop, like a microbiomes, that microbiomes also comes from the food what we eat, right? I mean,
Yeah, yeah,
because they feed on the, food we eat. So the mass of the microbiome is actually what we eat, what we ate. So,
yeah. You could think of it that
that's
way. Yeah,
another mass. Yeah.
yeah.
Okay. And okay, I was kind of questioning the term interconvertible. So from mass to energy, that's okay. I understand that. But the energy to mass, how that's possible, how
Yeah,
does it work,
in
We
theory.
need mass to have mass.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
just
yeah.
having energy,
Yeah,
how you create the mass.
yeah, well, that's a good point. I mean, I guess that one of the ways that you can think of it as, no, I mean, no, no, yeah. So the reason I said it's interconvertible is because in theory it is because there's that equal sign in the formula. So when there's an equal sign, it's like, okay, well, if 2x equals 4, then 4 will equal 2x. It's like interconvertible. So theoretically it is. The problem is that in
Okay.
practice, you're not really going to see that happen. You're more so going to see the left to right, not the right to left, when you're actually writing it
Okay.
out. Um, because we see, like I said, even in our bodies, we see some mass being converted into energy, or even just in a regular chemical reaction that you do on a macroscopic scale. You're going to see, for example, if you react two reactants together to form a product, some heat will be released. So the final mass or the mass of the final product may actually be less than the added masses of the reactants because some of it was lost as energy. Um, that is in the case of an exothermic reaction, of course. But I guess you know what? We do have endothermic reactions though, so that would be a way that's a practical way that it happens. For example, H2O plus H2O, so two water molecules can bump together to form
Mhm.
H3O plus hydronium and OH minus, which is a hydroxide ion. So that's endothermic,
Mhm.
meaning that when H2O and H2O, two molecules react together, they will actually use heat to cause that to happen. So that's
Mhm.
that's a way that it happens.
Right. Yeah, but you need H2O, right? So,
Yeah, you'll still need mass in order for that to happen, but
right.
it's a way
Okay. Got it.
of yeah, it's a way of energy being converted into more mass effectively, in a way, I guess. I have to review I'd have to review it because the heat mainly is it causes the electrons in the outer shells of the water molecules to be more excited, so they're more likely to react with each other. That doesn't necessarily mean that there's any energy that's actually being converted to mass to form hydronium and hydroxide, H3O plus and OH minus. What that shows is actually that there's endothermic reactions that involve heat just exciting the activity of molecules. So it's something that I should definitely look into that before I say something like, oh, well, yeah, heat in that scenario actually does contribute to more mass, because that could very well not be true. In fact, on the surface, it doesn't really sound right. But
Hmm.
but yeah, you're on the right track. Like mass you can see mass convert into energy. It's lost to energy production. But you rarely see the opposite happen. You rarely see that. So it's interesting to say the least.
Okay. All right. I have additional like my question about brain composition, like fatty acids,
Hmm.
like DHA, EPA, I mean DHA and arachidonic acids.
Yeah, I think
Mm,
DHA, EPA, and then arachidonic. Those three.
right.
Yeah.
But I heard the arachidonic acid is kind of omega-6
Yeah.
and it's inflammatory, you know. So
Yeah.
from food, I mean, it's why if it's composed in our brain, like half of it, then why it's bad, considered as
Yeah. So this is a good question. You're right to say that arachidonic acid is effectively an omega-6 fatty acid. Really, what happens is you've got linoleic acid, and then it goes through a conversion process and results in arachidonic acid production. Um, and arachidonic acid is directly involved in the stimulation, if you will, of inflammatory compounds, so the inflammatory cascade. Things like you've got molecules like thromboxanes that cause the blood to thicken, to clot. Um, you've got things like um, there's one at the top of my head, and leukotrienes. You've got prostaglandins. That was the one I was thinking of. And you've
Mhm.
also got lipoxins, all that stuff. Those are the four main ones that we talk about. I believe one of them, the last one, is actually anti-inflammatory. But either way, it's a net inflammatory cascade. And then you've got the omega-3 the fats that they convert into something adjacent, but they're involved directly. The compounds they are involved in producing are very, they're very slightly different. And so they actually don't contribute to inflammation. They're actively anti-inflammatory. So that's why the theory goes, oh, well, omega-6, don't consume a lot of omega-6 because, well, it's going to cause inflammation. I am not a fan of the reductionism that is engaged in with that argument, though. If you have a mechanism like, oh, this leads to this leads to this causes inflammation. Therefore, you're going to be systemically inflamed when you consume things like seed oils. Okay, your conclusion may be correct. It may very well be correct. I may even agree with the position. However, you can't just point to a mechanism like that and then say, boom, slam dunk, for the reasons that you just laid out. Well, what about the necessity for omega-6 fats in the body? What about the fact that they exist in the brain? The question becomes what is too much and what is too little,
Mhm.
really what is the right amount. But also the question is, you have multiple questions. When you consume these fats in a specific ratio, how much is absorbed? Okay, is there a diminishing return for absorption? If you actually study physiology, you realize that every single thing in the body has diminishing returns. Absorption rates, enzyme activity, it's a diminishing return kind of thing. Lots of questions involved. What I usually say with respect to this debate about omega-6 versus omega-3 is when you look at how much polyunsaturated fat content, because that's really what we're talking about, polyunsaturated fats. When you look at how much of that in absolute terms was consumed historically by all humans from every inference we have, chemical anthropology, observational anthropology, for example, and just even current wildlife that's untouched by human nature. you realize that it's an extremely small amount for both omega-3 and omega-6, and that clearly didn't interfere with our ability to build bigger brains. We also know that if that ratio is as low as it was throughout history, that going beyond that amount, especially to the degree that's seen in seed oils, for example, grapeseed oil can have a ratio, omega-6 to omega-3 ratio of 800 to 1, I believe, which is massive. Um, we know that going beyond that amount is going to be a deviation away from what our genes withstood throughout history, and then that poses a
Is it
very
grape or rape seed? What?
grape seed with a G in the front.
Grape. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
Rapeseed oil is effectively canola oil, and it's a lot less offensive in that respect. I don't think that you should be consuming them still, but the omega-6 to omega-3 ratio on that one is like, I believe I've seen it's like 2 to 1, actually, as low as, at least. Um, I think there's many other problems with seed oils, but that wasn't the specific question. It was with respect to arachidonic acid. So typically, once again, I say if you go beyond that ratio of omega-6 to omega-3, I think that you're posing a very serious risk to the organism, especially whenever you combine that fact with if you're consuming that much seed oil, you're also not only consuming a bunch of seed oil, you're replacing it with saturated fat. So you're actually getting
Hmm.
the worst of both worlds. You're getting less of what you probably should be getting, and you're getting more of what you definitely shouldn't be getting. So, yeah, EPA, DHA, arachidonic acid, they have a role to play in the brain and throughout history, given the very small amount that it seems that we were consuming throughout history, that we definitely were consuming throughout history, it didn't seem to interfere with our ability for our bodies to build up the brain that we have. So I think it's unwise to say that it's insufficient. The amount you get on a carnivore diet is insufficient for brain capacity or something like that.
Okay. My final question
Okay.
is arachidonic acids, can they go like through the blood blood-brain barrier, or the
Mhm.
brain actually makes it inside?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It actually does make it inside. This is something that I just recently started talking about. I usually the notion is that fatty acids themselves, they can't pass the blood-brain barrier. And as a general rule, that's correct. It's why you'll never really see the brain using fats for ATP production purposes. You'll only see fat in the brain for structure purposes, like you were just laying out, the actual structure of the brain. Um, the only fatty acids that I read one study, it was a long time ago, and I saw that the only fatty acids that have ever been observed to pass the blood-brain barrier are all fats like the ones you just laid out, which I don't think is any coincidence because so it's EPA, DHA, and then you've got arachidonic acid and potentially a few others. They're usually the polyunsaturated fats. And it's precisely because they are involved in forming the structure of your brain. They're the only fats that can actually pass the blood-brain barrier. But you'll never see really
Hmm.
the brain using fats for energy production. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It does happen to a slight extent, and it also depends on the circumstances as well. For example, this is also, I know this doesn't have anything to do with fat, but it's just another congruency that I see when with respect to the brain doing something in a very small quantity that you would never expect to actually be doing. The brain also has a small capacity for producing its own glucose, which is also very
Hmm.
interesting. An extremely small capacity as observed, but it does have the ability evinced by the presence of a very prominent gluconeogenic enzyme, and I can't remember the exact one it was. I think it was PepsiK is the abbreviation, phosphoenol pyruvate carboxykinase. Very long name, but hence why it's abbreviated. But yeah,
Hmm.
it's it is true that arachidonic acid can pass through the blood-brain barrier, and it's usually the polyunsaturated fats, and you will also not see the fats used for energy production, but rather present in the structure of the brain. So I believe that's why it has the ability to pass through. So
Oh, so they pass through, huh? They
yeah,
can be also made inside brain, also kind of build the AA, electronic acid.
yes, yeah, 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 yeah. Alpha lina, yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah. Are you referring to ALA or are you referring to
No,
AA?
arachidonic acid can
Yeah.
be, pass through the blood-brain barrier, but also brain also can brain also like a build its own arachidonic acid within, inside the brain from scratch, let's say.
I would be shocked if it couldn't, frankly, given the importance of it, for the same reasons that our body, even whenever we're not consuming cholesterol, can consume all of the, well, can create all of the cholesterol it needs to survive. The question
Mhm.
is, whether that's the amount that it needs to thrive or not, which, I have my opinions on that. But yeah, I'd be shocked if the brain didn't have some capacity to do that, especially given the extreme importance of the brain as an organ. Um,
Mhm.
so
Right.
but to be fair, I would have to look into that specifically, but I'd be shocked if it didn't have that ability, frankly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Yeah, I guess that's all I have for now.
All right.
Let's see. Peter approves me.
Yeah. Let's hope. I have no doubt that he will. He was whenever I was about to schedule this, he was uh talking about how smart you were as a person. So I don't think I don't think he'll reject you or anything like that. But yeah, no, I enjoyed answering the questions. And I am glad that you found it of utility. And if you have any more questions, by the way, you can email me again for any further ones as well. And I can get to scheduling that as soon
Yeah.
as possible and within our conveniences. So, yeah.
Oh yeah. And are you engaged, I guess?
Yes, yes, I am.
All right.
Yeah,
All right.
very
The
recently. Very
birthday is
recently.
coming too.
Yeah, yeah. But
All right.
yeah. Well, I look forward to talking to you and answering more questions in the future if you have any need of more answering. And I look forward to that. So
Thank you so much, Eddie, for everything, your time.
yeah, no problem. Have a good day.
Thank you. See you.